Hello and welcome to Freya's Tropical Garden. This is episode 3 of the new format of my video and I really hope you've been enjoying it. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you are enjoying it, please do hit the subscribe button because that really does help my channel to grow. We've had great weather down here on the south coast still. We have managed to have a little bit of rain, however it hasn't lasted for very long and we're back to this glorious sunshine again. The rain earlier in the week definitely provided a welcome break from all the sun, and the plants seem to have enjoyed it too. Coming up on today's episode, we take a look at how my chilli plants have been getting on. I visit the unusual plant fair at Gilbert White's house and speak to Miles about air pots and peat-free compost. Elisa tells us about conservatory planting. I give my top 5 tips on how to create a tropical garden on a budget. And we take a look at the Southsea rock gardens. There's also another opportunity to see my video on how to take leaf cuttings from a begonia. But first is my garden update, and this is what's changed since last time. It's been 2 weeks since I last updated you on how my garden's going, and you can see it has been growing like crazy. I'm sure if you look back in some of my older videos from the winter, you'll see just what a difference it has made now. A lot of my foliage plants like cannas and gingers are really starting to fill up the gaps in between the bigger plants. In terms of flowering plants, there's not quite so many at the moment. This chocolate sunflower looks stunning. But this variety lost its label, so I'm not sure what it was. These begonias are now flowering at the front of one of my beds, which gives much needed colour. However, earlier this week it was quite a different story, because it seemed that everything that was flowering was in shades of orange or yellow, or both. This is completely unintentional and not planned with my planting, but it just seemed to happen that everything seemed to be colour coordinated. From the canna patterns with their lovely orange and yellow flowers, through to the red hot pokers that have started flowering in the orange and yellow. And even the sunflowers, which I bought to be more reddy, browny colours, are flowering in more of an orange-yellow colour at the moment. And of course the lilies that I got flowering are also orange. The red hot poker is a stunning flower in a tropical garden. Unfortunately they don't last very long, and now these ones are starting to fade away. And the flowers on this curry plant are also yellow. And now this yellow variety of red hot poker is also starting to flower. I don't know what this is called because we've had this a few years. But this variety does tend to flower a lot longer than the red ones. And I also have a variety of giant red hot poker, although this one isn't flowering yet, and only produced 1 flower last year, so I hope it does better this year. But some of these canna patterns flowers are starting to turn to seed now. You can see the seed pods starting to form here. So I'm just going to remove these, and this will help encourage the canna to keep flowering throughout the year. But I am really excited to see this lily called Lilium regale flowering finally, because I bought this last year and it didn't produce any flowers. And it hasn't disappointed because it is just stunning. And unusually it has these very attractive, thin, feathery type leaves. But although flowers are few in my garden at the moment, there is still a lot of colour coming from some of the foliage that I've planted, such as these caladiums or this cordyline pink passion. And of course I grow a lot of the strobilanthes, Persian shield. And this adds a lot of colour to the garden. And I grow irisine herbstii, which adds a lovely splash of pink. But this celosia is one of my absolute favourites. It's a celosia coxcomb, and even though it's an annual, I try to grow it every year because I absolutely love the texture of this flower. And the other celosia I try to grow every year is Dragon's Breath. It's not flowering yet, but it has a lovely feathery red flower. And this crocosmia, which is a variety called Lucifer, is just getting ready to flower now, and this will be stunning in a few days' time. I also have these beautiful tiny little orange and yellow flowers called Ipomoea Spanish Flag. And this tiny little red morning glory here is one of my favourites, and I try to grow it every year. I harvest the seeds in autumn, and this year quite a few of my seeds germinated, so I should get plenty of these lovely red flowers growing up this trellis soon. And you can see they have this lovely feathery leaf as well. Makes them a very beautiful plant. Most of my colocasias have come back now after being overwintered outdoors. Although this colocasia, called Colocasia Wagyu, and this one, Pharaoh's Mask, were only planted this year. But this very tiny leaf looks like my mojito's coming back. And Jack's Giant's got plenty of shoots growing now. This will have lovely big leaves. And of course my Colocasia Pink China's been growing well now for a couple of months. A lot of my Nicotianas are maybe 2 to 4 times bigger since episode 2. And by episode 4, I'm sure you'll see another remarkable difference in size. And the leaves are out now on my Sauromatum voodoo lilies. This is the variety that produces its leaves after it flowers, and you can see it has this lovely mottled stem. And this is Sauromatum venosum Indian Giant. This is another variety of voodoo lily, but it's a lot bigger than the other Sauromatum. This was new to me last year, and it's just started growing again this year. The Dracunculus voodoo lily grows very differently, however. Once the flower dies back, the leaves also die back and disappear for the rest of the summer, as mine are now. The Ricinus that I sowed in spring are now getting a lot bigger, and this is a plant that will grow very quickly throughout this year. And I've actually discovered 2 self-seeded Ricinus here, so I'm going to let these ones grow as well. And now my cannas are really starting to get going. This makes such a huge difference to the garden. This one's Canna musifolia. And this one's Canna Cleopatra, which has this lovely red stripe through the leaf. And when it flowers, it is absolutely stunning with red and yellow flowers as well. In my last video, I did point out how easy it is to worry that your early canna leaf might have cannavirus. You can see now that the second leaf has come out, it's got this wonderful gold streak through it, which is absolutely healthy and nothing wrong with that at all. And although not tropical, I've now got some tomatoes growing. These ones are cherry tomatoes. This is called Red Zebra. And these ones are called Indigo Black, which is a lovely variety. And I always say don't give up on your seeds too early, because I discovered this seedling, Boshonaria yacoides, growing in it this week. And I think there might be a brahia growing as well. And my Manahot Grayamii is the perfect example of why you shouldn't give up, because this took 11 months to germinate. However, I'm still waiting patiently for any sign of germination from my Musa seeds that I sowed a couple of months ago. Next, I have an update on how my chilies have been doing. It's been 5 months since I sowed my chili seeds, so it's about time I gave you an update on how they're doing. As you can see now, most of my chilies are in their final pot size now, and many of my plants are big and bushy and very healthy. And I've got lots of fruit starting to appear on them as well. So I'm just going to take you through some of the plants that have got chilies growing. This is one of my Sugar Rush chilies. Although the label has faded, I'm pretty sure it's a Sugar Rush Twisty. And this chili is a Royal Lantern Pink. You can see here I've got a Nagla growing. And I have a few of these Fidalgo Roxas. I have my first Caramel Trinidad Scorpion here. And this chili plant I bought from a supermarket, and it's just labelled Hot Chili Yellow. I've got the start of a Gibbering Idiot growing here. However, unfortunately with this one, the label has faded so much I can't read it. Hopefully as it develops further, I'll find it easier to identify. I've got plenty of chilies on my Zimbabwe black plants now. And you can see some of them have even turned red. Now these Zimbabwe blacks are actually very true to form, even though they were grown from seeds that I collected from my own chilies. However, this one is definitely crossed with something, because the leaves are green and the chilies themselves are very long. So although it's harvested from a Zimbabwe black, you can see it's going to be quite different, and I'll be looking forward to trying one of these. And the same thing has happened with my chocolate butlers. These look much more like the Phileas Blues I grew a couple of years ago. Next up, we're taking a trip to Gilbert White's house in Selborne for the 30th Unusual Plants Fair. Today I'm here at Gilbert White's house for the Unusual Plants Fair. Gilbert White was an 18th century naturalist who lived in the quiet village of Selborne in Hampshire. He wrote a world-famous book called The Natural History and Antiquities of Selborne. But he also kept a diary called the Garden Calendar, from which most of the gardens have been recreated. As you walk around the garden, you'll see these diary excerpts written onto slate, and these help to provide an interesting insight. Gilbert White collected a lot of unusual plants, and much like many of us today, needed to come up with ways of growing the more tropical varieties in the English climate. This melon frame is constructed on a bed of straw and contains horse manure to provide extra heat. And the temperature inside can be regulated by sliding the glass panels. In the 18th century, having a statue in your garden was seen as a sign of status. Gilbert White came from very humble beginnings, so he used this illusion to create his statue. Can you spot what it is he's done? So as you can see, this statue is actually just made of wood. It's a very clever illusion that I would never have guessed if I hadn't been told. This oak tree was planted in 1730 by Gilbert White when he was just 10 years old. So this location is a beautiful place to visit anyway, and the ideal place to hold the Unusual Plants Fair. The Unusual Plants Fair is an annual event with many stallholders gathered together to sell plants. As well as a range of different plants for sale, you can also stop by and speak to experts for advice, or listen to the talks and presentations that are being given. So I'm here today with Miles from Miles Japanese Maples. Miles, I've noticed you're growing all your plants in air pots, isn't it?
In air pots, yes.
Could you tell me a little bit about what they are and what they do for your plants?
Yeah, sure. So air pots are designed to stop root spiralling in the container, which can be a big problem with woody plants. The idea is that the roots, as they grow out from the tree, would normally hit the wall of the container and then they would just spiral round and round. These are guided out towards the holes, if you can see inside there. They're guided out towards the holes, they meet the air, and obviously the root can't survive in the air. So the idea is that the tip of the root effectively dies back, which is the equivalent to being pruned, and so the root on the inside then branches out. And so you end up with a really nice fibrous root system, because that happens again and again and again. So they establish much better and you grow a happier tree.
Are there particular types of plants that you find do better in these pots?
Well, I only grow aces in them. So I know places like Kew and Wakehurst now only use air pots in their production, and they grow thousands of different types of plants.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't grow anything in there, say like bamboo, which might possibly grow out of the side.
Yeah.
But anything else, yeah. I did do some tomatoes in them last year. They did very well.
Yeah, you can still see a noticeable difference.
You can see a noticeable difference, yeah, absolutely.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about the plants that you grow here?
Yeah, so I grow a range of Acer palmatum cultivars, all sorts of different Japanese maples. I grow some from seed, but most of them are grown by grafting. So you can see, for example, on this little tree here, this is a dissectum called viridis. The graft is down here, would have been grafted a couple of years ago. And you have to graft Japanese maples if you want to keep the characteristics of the tree. So it's a genetic copy each time, same as you would with apples or any of the particular cultivars. And I grow them all at home in my back garden. We're peat-free, don't use any pesticides or anything. And I grow as many different types as I possibly can fit in.
So that's another thing, because a lot of gardeners are finding peat-free compost quite difficult at the moment. What do you do to make sure that the peat-free compost has enough nutrients?
So after 7 years now, and each year I've been tweaking the compost mix. So currently I'm using a coir-based peat-free, but I'm mixing that with some wool compost as well, which helps with the nutrient levels. But I'm also including some John Innes #3, which helps buffer the nutrients out as well, and an organic fertiliser, which definitely helps rather than the chemical fertiliser, I find. And I'm experimenting this year with biochar. So each year it gets, I think, a little bit better. But I think it's experimentation, definitely. You have to be careful that you don't rule something out within the first couple of years. Sometimes you need to allow a plant a good season or two before you make a decision about the compost. Don't just assume that something's wrong with it, then change it for something else, give it a chance to get settled in. Yeah.
It'll take each plant a little bit of time to adjust to a new mix.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's all right.
So I'm here with Lisa. Lisa works with Fleur De Lys, and can you tell me a little bit about some of the plants that you grow?
Yes, I can. Freya, I grow plants that like to live under glass. So that means for us conservatories, greenhouses, orangeries, swimming pool enclosures, that kind of protected environment.
Lovely. How did you get started growing these?
That's a good question. All my training is in horticulture, but I specialised in fruit when I first started out, fruit production, apples, pears, soft fruits, etc. And then after a while thought I'd really love to work for myself. So this became a business idea. That was quite a long time ago, Freya. And of course then the conservatory business was booming and people were putting up conservatories all over the place. That has calmed down now, but there are a lot of different takes on glass buildings, more so than ever before. Some people seem to have a lot of glass in an extension, let's say an office in the garden, big bifold doors from the kitchen out into the garden, all that kind of thing. We've always got a plant that we can think that's a great space for that plant.
Lovely. So what plants do you recommend for the brightest parts of the conservatory?
It depends very much on whether the conservatory's got heat in the winter. Some people run a building with no heat at all, and that's one set of plants, what I would call temperate plants really. Those that don't mind going down to just above freezing, so they're protected by the glass but there's no extra heat input. And you could try all kinds of things. What could we think of just for now? These ferns, for example. This is a beautiful foxtail fern. The florists love this. It gets big and these plumes get longer and longer and longer. It's lovely to grow and you can cut them for flower arrangements. That likes that kind of winter, it's fine, but it also needs some shade in the summer. And this is just such a plant, Brillantasia. It looks like a huge overgrown salvia, but it is actually not a salvia. And it has a fantastic knuckle at the bottom, which I don't know if you can just see it, knuckle of growth, which it's a perennial plant, and that knuckle gets bigger and bigger and bigger each year and produces more and more upright shoots each year. So you can, in the end, grow a whacking great plant, and it gets taller and taller. Now this is a modest young one, but we have some people who grow these and they end up about 6, 7, 8 feet tall with plumes on the top. Terrific plant.
Oh, wonderful.
But no heat required in the winter.
And also with the Livingstonia that I've just purchased.
Livingstonia, yes. Well, our experience of that is they're pretty hardy. When you read about them, they say, yes, it's fine to go down to below 0. I would say that very much depends on where your below 0 is. If it's in a wet back garden in an English winter, I would be very cautious myself. But I think in protected overhead by glass of some sort, conservatory, greenhouse, no heat, I would say is perfectly happy.
What's your favourite type of plants to grow here?
That's a very difficult thing to say. It depends which year it is. This year I think one of my favourite things is this plant, Cissus.
Oh wow.
We've grown these for a few years and nobody's paid them any attention or been very interested, and I'm not sure why, but actually they've suddenly become quite interesting to people this year. And it has beautiful vine-like leaves and it grows extremely long if you want it to. So it will trail or climb. It has these little tendrils, and I just love it. How could you not love that?
No, that's wonderful.
Is it
for a
charming?
hanging plant,
Yeah,
isn't
it is, isn't it? Terrific, great fun, and also really nice to mix in with the tropicals, I think, because it really goes in with them somehow. So yes, that's my plant of the year.
Wonderful. And what sort of plants do you find the easiest to propagate?
I'm not brilliant at seed sowing. It's not my thing really, but cuttings I do enjoy doing. So all of these plants have a time of year when cuttings work. Some of them have a very narrow window like that, where if you don't take it at 12 o'clock on that day, that's it, you've blown it. And some have a very much broader space in time where you could take cuttings, softwood cuttings in the spring, let's say, semi-ripes a bit later on, and then hardwood cuttings over the winter, and they will still root out at different intervals of time. So yeah, cuttings are good. And yeah, having the right facility to get them rooted, that's helpful. Some of your cuttings that you might take in the winter time need a bit of heat at the bottom to really get them rooted out.
And this plant here just behind you, this is absolutely beautiful. These wonderful pink flowers.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. This is bougainvillea, which is originally from Asia. And as such, they like settled periods of the same day length as compared to the night. So 12-hour-long days and nights they love, and they love the same consistent temperatures, humidity. So they like life to be the same all year round. Well, of course, over here, you don't get that, do you? We have seasons. So they behave slightly differently here than they do where they come from. And we have to find ways of protecting them in the winter. They need about 10 degrees centigrade to get through the winter. So they like bright light. If you've got those two things, I would say they're one of the easiest conservatory plants you can grow. A lot of people come to us and say, can I put that in the garden? And the answer really is yes, but you have to protect it in the winter. So it's not garden hardy as such.
And what sort of protection? You mean bringing it indoors for winter?
Indoors, yeah. It's
Like-
got to be warm enough to get through the winter, and that's really minimum of 10 degrees C.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. There's also a lovely stall here from Palms UK. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get an interview with Natalie. However, she did talk me through some of her plants, including this one here, which is the Camarops volcano. This is a more compact variety of Camarops and is ideal for growing in a container. It is also a multi-stem bush variety. Here we have the smaller Trachycarpus waggeranus, and a larger plant is also available for sale today. This palm is very hardy and has much darker green leaves than the more common Trachycarpus fortunei. Its leaves are also more rigid, which helps it stand up better in strong winds. Whereas the Trachycarpus fortunei has individual fingers that will move around in the wind. Brahia amata, or the Mexican blue palm, is also very stunning for its blue leaves, and these are even more vibrant when in the sunshine. This is thought to be hardy in the milder parts of the country, but can be grown in colder parts with some protection. It's difficult to propagate and slow growing, which does make it one of the more expensive varieties of palm to buy. But it is definitely a beautiful addition to any garden. This Camarops is another bushy variety of palm. The Camarops tend to be quite slow growing as well, although they are more hardy and easier to propagate than the Brahia. And this particular plant actually won a gold medal at Chelsea. And this silver leaf variety is Camarops seraphia. Now, at the time I visited this stall, this was actually the only palm they still had for sale, so of course I had to buy it. Plus, I've been wanting a silver leaf variety of palm. Well, I've had a lovely day at the Unusual Plant Fair today. It's been a hot day, but the weather's been fantastic, and I've got some lovely plants to show for it. I've got this Chamarops, I've got this Courtleya, which is a relative of the ginger, and I have my Livingstonia palm tree, so I'm going to have some happy gardening planting these. Now, I started this garden from scratch and it hasn't cost me the earth. These are my 5 tips on how to create a tropical garden on a budget. When I first moved into this property, we had a lovely blank canvas to start off with. But I actually started out by collecting my plants and keeping them in pots. And as the plants grew bigger and the pots needed to get bigger, eventually it seemed it was time to move things into the ground. And the first plant to actually get planted was this Acer here. And that was 3 years ago now, and look how much it's grown in that time. And planting this tree led to all the rest. So tip number 1 is to start small. It may seem obvious, but you don't need to landscape your whole garden in one go. This bed with a small Musabasju in it is one of the first that I created, and 3 years on you can see how much everything has grown inside it. And then only last year I added this new bed to the garden. And even now the slate path isn't yet finished. And I've only just started planting this bed this year. And I can't wait to get started on the next bed. I still have plenty of grass left to make new beds, so this is an ongoing project. And even my small pond that I'm creating is on hold for a little bit until I get some more stone for it. Tip number 2 is to buy small plants. Many of the plants that we grow in tropical gardens, like this Musabasju, are very fast growing, so there's very little point in spending a lot of money to get a bigger plant if you can just be patient for a couple of years. If you're looking for some quick height, then these ricinus seedlings grow very big very quickly. Although they're only annuals, this one here will easily be 6 foot tall by the end of the growing season. And Nicotiana also grows quickly in one season and has the most beautiful flowers. And although they might not be tropical, if you're looking to get some quick height, then you can always use a lot of sunflowers in your garden. And some varieties will grow 8 or 9 foot. In terms of fast-growing perennials, this Ruim is a very good one if you're looking to get some big leaves into your garden. And my gunner has only taken a couple of years to get from very small to some massive leaves that we're getting this year now. But this does need to drink a lot of water to get to the bigger sizes. I've sunk a trough under this one. And even a small Tetrapanix won't take very long until it's producing some wonderful big leaves. The variety Steroidal Giant is particularly fast growing. And Paulonia tomentosa is so fast growing you can coppice it right down to the ground and it will still grow back fast. In terms of palm trees, I find that the Washingtonia, Robusta or Folifera are one of the faster growing palms. Though not as hardy as Trachycarpus, I grew all mine from seed only about 6 years ago and they're already a lot bigger than my other palms. I lost a couple this winter, but most of them have made it through. And tower lilies only take a couple of years before they start reaching some spectacular heights, and with the flowers that they produce as well, they can be an absolutely stunning addition to a tropical garden. My 3rd tip is to propagate. One of the easiest ways to do this is through division, and my cannas are one of the best plants to do that with. This canna patterns I've got in several places of my garden. It's a beautiful plant, and it's all just stemmed from the one original one that I bought. By dividing your plants and moving them around the garden, especially if you're creating a new bed, it can really help to get some quickly established plants, and it really ties together the planting. This canna Russian red grows about 7 foot tall by the end of the season, and I've got this in several places of the garden. It also has the most beautiful orange flowers. Colocasias are also really good for dividing. I've got masses of this that I've now started to move around to other areas of the garden. This one is a variety called Pink China. And I have a few varieties of hardy ginger growing in my garden. These can spread like wildfire, so it's really easy to divide a clump and move it somewhere else. And of course the Musabasju banana produces so many pups that you'll find it very easy to divide them and move them to other areas of the garden. And I demonstrated how to do this on my video on the Musabasju. And then there are plants like this Persicaria red dragon that are very easy to take cuttings. I have a few past videos on how to take cuttings, but this is a wonderful way of producing new plants, and some of them can grow very quickly and you can have several new plants by this method. And of course you can propagate by growing from seed, because of course most seeds are quite inexpensive to buy, and with the right plants some of them can grow very quickly in 1 year. These sweet corn plants will be a lot taller by the end of the year. And this variegated variety has a lovely pink streak and red fruit. As previously mentioned, Nicotiana is another one that grows really quickly from seed, even though it's just an annual. And the Ricinus, which is absolutely fantastically fast growing from seed. Tip number 4 is to search Facebook Marketplace or other local advertising sources. I picked this Camerops humilis up from someone locally who was moving and needed to sell their plants. Fortunately, it was already in a pot, but there are many sellers who will give their plants away free if you're prepared to dig them up. These are just some of the many plants that I've managed to pick up cheaply on Facebook Marketplace. Many local sellers will sell their plants a lot more cheaply than you'll find them in garden centres. And this iris was given to me for free when I bought something else. Even some of the hard landscaping, like this Japanese bridge, I picked up on Facebook Marketplace for next to nothing and repainted myself. I've even managed to find pieces of slate going for free, which I'm going to be breaking up and using on my next path. And following on from this, my final tip is to use Facebook Marketplace or card boot sales to sell your own excess plants. These Camerops humilis pups have all come off the main plant that I bought. And there are so many extra plants that I've got, either from cuttings or from division or just from sowing too many seeds. And then of course selling these plants can give you extra money to buy more. Next up, I'm going to take you around the Southsea rock gardens. The Southsea Rock Gardens are located on the south coast of Portsea Island, which many may know better as Portsmouth. This is a free public garden, so it's well worth visiting if you're in the local area. The gardens were originally created in 1928 using unskilled labour from the government's Back to Work scheme after the World War I depression. And although the garden has changed a few times over the years due to various factors such as flooding and hurricanes, it remains a beautiful and tranquil place to walk through or sit for a moment in contemplation. The Southsea Rock Gardens is sunken, which provides some shelter from wind and also from the salt from the sea. And it is planted with quite a few non-native species, with a lot of plants being chosen for their salt-resistant or drought-resistant qualities. So as you're walking through, you'll find a mixture of pine trees, low shrubs, alpines, herbaceous bedding, and some tropical plants and cacti too. The gardens are maintained by Portsmouth City Council, who employ one head gardener full-time to look after it, as well as a team of volunteers called the Friends of Southsea Rock Gardens. The gardens also include many sensory plants, such as myrtle and rosemary, which was requested by the Royal Institute of the Blind. The many connecting winding paths and steps mean it's very easy to take a wander around the garden with several entry points into and out of the garden. There are several benches for sitting, and many of them are hidden away in secluded little locations for peace and quiet. There's plenty to explore in the garden, and you could almost miss this beautiful fountain hidden away in one of the more secluded spots, with a cascade of water flowing all the way down to the ponds in the lower garden. And if you look carefully, you may even find some small fish in the upper pond. And there's an abundance of bees, birds and butterflies that visit the garden, so it can be great for photography or just to sit and watch. The fountain was built in 1932, at the same time as an aviary was added housing tropical birds, although this is no longer in place today. And then the gardens were closed during World War II and replanted with more tolerant plants, while the damage caused by the 1986 hurricane led to a renovation including better lighting and ramps for the disabled access. In 1949, a storm caused it to get flooded with water from the sea, but prompt access from the fire department led to them pumping the water out very quickly and saturating it with fresh water, so actually very little damage was done. For me, of course, as a lover of tropical gardening in particular, I find that this garden is wonderful for providing a few varieties of palm trees, cordylines, yuccas, echiums, succulents and cacti such as a puntia, which can be hardy down here on the south coast, although they weren't looking too good on my visit on this occasion. But the planting really is so varied, I'm sure there'll be something for everyone to enjoy here. And for a garden that costs nothing to visit and is open 24 hours a day, every day of the year, it is well worth a visit if you're in the area. Coming next, there's another chance to see my video on how to take leaf cuttings from a begonia. Today I'm going to be taking leaf cuttings from a begonia called Incan Nights. This type of propagation method works really well with most types of begonia rex, as well as many other types of plants. Leaf cuttings are best taken in spring or summer, however they can be taken at any time of year. So I prepared a pot with seed compost mixed with perlite to make sure that the soil is free draining. But if you don't have this available, any type of multi-purpose compost will do. Then take a single begonia leaf and turn it upside down so that you can clearly see the veins. And then with a sharp knife you're going to cut this into segments, making sure that there is a good strong vein running all the way down to the bottom of each segment. Just make sure you don't lose the direction of these veins, because they do need to be pointing downwards when you plant them into the soil. You can also use the segment that had the main stem on, because they do tend to root well as well. So it's best to make sure that your compost is damp before you start. And here I'm using a spatula to make the hole, simply because it's wide and flat. And then into that hole you can place the segment of leaf with the vein pointing downwards, and then just firm the soil around it. Now at this point I think it's quite useful to put all the segments into the same pot. And in the past I've been able to put 8 different segments into the same pot, and they've all produced healthy plants. You'll find they don't need a massive amount of space between them either. And then once you've planted your segments, you cover them over with a plastic bag, ideally a Ziploc bag that you can seal underneath. But this sandwich bag tied underneath works well as well. The main objective of course being to make sure that your pot doesn't dry out. And then you shouldn't need to water it again while the plants are developing. Now ideally I place these in a heated propagator with a grow light, but any warm bright space like a sunny windowsill should do. And then in about 4 weeks' time you should find that you're starting to get little plantlets starting to emerge from the soil. At this time it's best to remove the bag from the pot to allow the plant to breathe. Don't allow the soil to get too wet, but do keep an eye on the watering because you don't want it to dry out completely. And now you can see I have some lovely little plantlets, each with some well-developed root systems, so they can be divided and potted up individually now. Well, thank you for watching. That's all for today, but here's what we've got to look forward to next time. I'm going to be visiting Arundel Castle for their plant fair, and we'll be taking a look around their beautiful tropical gardens and showing you some of the plants that they have. And I'll be reviewing a few of the plant apps that are around and seeing just how effective they are for those of us who are growing tropical plants. And of course I'll provide another update on my tropical garden. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and on my website, and please don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you've enjoyed the content.